I am an urban explorer, searching for structures that don't make sense. As you've probably gleaned from the title of this post, I am an urban explorer. My speciality is finding and investigating structures that, for lack of any better description, just don't make sense. Sometimes it's something small, like a house that's slightly wider on the inside than the outside. That's quite common and often goes unnoticed. Maybe a door gets minutely wider as you open it, then returns to its original dimensions when it gets closed. Then there's the big stuff. The stuff I'm actually interested in. Rooms that shouldn't exist, impossibly high ceilings, that sort of thing. I don't normally post anything here. I tend to just read all your spooky stories and personal experiences, which make me feel like my experiences aren't that unusual to be having, as bizarre as that sounds. I wanted my first post here to be a document of all the weird encounters I've had with strange places over the years. This post will still be that, but if I'm going to talk about all that, I also need to go into the events of the last month, which ultimately led to all my friends taking a step back from urban exploration altogether. So, a bit of background. I live in the UK, in Manchester. Like all cities, it has nice parts and not so nice parts. As much as I love the city, sometimes it feels like there isn't much to do. At least, nothing that interests us. So, every few weeks, me and my group of 4 friends hop on a train and go somewhere else. We pack bags full of camping equipment, torches, high-vis vests, plenty of rope, and anything else we think we might need. We scope out a spot, which normally involves checking social media for people talking about how they had an unusual experience near an abandoned building after dark, or how a family pet disappeared near a decommissioned train tunnel, stuff like that. Once we have a spot that's likely to be the kind of thing we're after, we figure out what we might need, what we are likely to encounter, etc. Most explorations are fairly routine. We stay the night nearby, watching the area to see if there are any guards or squatters. 9 times out of 10 there aren't. Then we make our entry. Typically, we open the door or poke our heads in through a window first, just to see what we're dealing with. You never know when you're going to walk through the front door without a care in the world and fall down a bottomless pit. No, that hasn't happened yet. It very nearly happened to one of the guys last year, but we've been very cautious since then. Some of my favorite places include: I love the, possibly, endless train tunnel. It was a lot of fun. I won't say where it is. I don't want a bunch of people to go there and ruin the spot with graffiti and rubbish and syringes and the like. Actually, I just looked it up, and apparently the police walled up both ends and sealed the tunnel a few months ago. A shame. Definitely my favorite place to visit. I hope no one ended up cluelessly wandering in. I was in there with another guy, and I remember very vividly the moment when we crossed over into the twilight zone, as my mate put it. He wasn't far off. When we were walking, we could feel the air gently moving through the tunnel. Even though we couldn't see the other end in the darkness, we knew there was an opening that air was blowing through. There was the occasional scatter of a squirrel or rat or something, which freaked us out every time it happened, sending the pair of us into a brief laughing fit over how much we had jumped. And then, after walking for about 5 minutes, the subtle breeze stopped. When it happened, we both instantly realized and stood motionless. It was like both ends of the tunnel had closed. There were no more rats or squirrels, just the pair of us, alone in the quiet darkness. Naturally, we were grinning like giddy kids. My torch didn't work, nor did my mate's. We tried tugging the rope secured around our waists to let our friends at the tunnel's entrance know that we were past the threshold, but they couldn't feel any tension in the rope from their end. We kept on walking. This tunnel wasn't very long, but you couldn't see the daylight at the end because the tunnel actually had a slight curve in it. In the past, before the anomaly formed, you'd walk through the tunnel, and in 2 minutes, you would be out the other side. We walked for 20, the slight curve in the tunnel leading us round in a wide arch, until we reckoned we were actually facing back the way we came. We stood there, theorizing how far the tunnel carried on curving around, debating whether to go further. We eventually decided not to. I didn't fancy walking for hours just to end up finding a dead end or something. When we reached the opening we had come from, the sounds of the world returned. Such an eerie feeling, being outside time and space. That's absolutely not a proven theory, by the way. That's just what I'm going with. It's like once you step past the threshold, the world outside stops existing. Or maybe it's you that stops existing for a moment. These strange places always smell the same. It's always the same persistent metallic odor. Sometimes it gets so intense that your eyes start to burn. Sometimes it can help you to find a threshold. There was one house we went to a couple years ago. One of my friends knew someone who said their house suddenly had an extra floor. That was extremely exciting. It's not every day you get to pinpoint the exact day that a building changed. Most of the time, we got to a place to find that the building had been that way for a while. But this one was fresh. Houses are particularly odd to visit. Sometimes it's just an extra room, so we have to wander through the entire house until we find a room that smells like metal, often with weird pictures on the walls and no windows. This house was different. A whole new floor had seemingly grown overnight. And the best part? It wasn't just one new floor. After exploring the house for probably a good 2 hours, our watches stopped working. We counted 16 additional floors in this 2-story house. The only reason we stopped climbing the endless staircases was because our buddies outside ran out of rope. That's another thing. We never go into a property without a length of rope tied around us, fed back to 2 guys standing outside, mainly so the guys inside can find their way out. We typically carry a few 60 and 70 meter lengths of mountaineering rope each, giving us about 500 meters when tied end to end. At one point we carried closer to 700 or 800 meters, but at that point it got tough to transport. We all wake up in cold sweats from nightmares, where we found ourselves lost in an abandoned building with no windows or doors, breathlessly diving down endless hallways, crying out for anyone to find them. Not pleasant. I remember the place we went to that first made the rope a necessary precaution. There was a small patch of woodland somewhere on the west coast of Wales, near a residential area. Again, no specifics. Not because I don't want to ruin the spot. This time, I straight up don't want people flocking there and getting themselves killed. We saw on social media, mainly Reddit, thanks, that a couple people's pets had gone missing around there. They thought a predatory animal might be in the woods, so they sent animal control to do a sweep, which didn't take long since it's an area of about 50 trees. It came up clean. That's what got our interest peaked. We showed up and started doing some surveillance. We had a theory that the anomaly was only manifesting during the night, which we had seen once or twice before at other locations. Probably something to do with the decreased visibility. We were right. We went in after dark, and suddenly the wooded area of 50 trees turned into a dense forest, seeming to go on for miles. Me and a buddy walked for 30 minutes before we stopped and headed back. Even with the rope tied around our waists, leading back to our friends at the edge of the woods, we still got lost. It was dark enough that we could barely see our ropes. We ended up circling around trees and each other's lines. We couldn't call out to the others either, since sound works differently once you're past the threshold. That means we couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear us. After a while of awkwardly stumbling around in the dark single file with my hand on his shoulder, pulling our ropes constantly to keep the tension, we made it out. That was the most frightened I have ever been when exploring a place. We don't do forests anymore. Some guy one of my friends used to hang out with always wanted to find out what caused the anomalies to form. We tended not to tell anyone about the anomalies, since the news and the police always cover up any instances, and we didn't want our friends or family getting taken in the night by G-men. That being said, some people came to know about them, this guy being one. He had a theory that a power plant he lived near was actually a secret underground hadron collider. That sounded awesome, so of course we checked it out. It turned out that the power plant was one of these strange places. We managed to dodge to surprisingly lax security and got in through a window to find that the geometry inside made absolutely no sense. There was no ceiling, first of all, just walls and doors that extended upwards into the darkness. A lot of rooms were either too big or far too small to make sense, and plenty of them were in weird places relative to the building's dimensions. By far the weirdest part was that this power plant was still in use. Workers still went in through the front door and came out hours later like regular plant workers, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the interior of their building looked like something fresh out of Stephen King's nightmares. I started believing that guy after seeing all that. I don't know about the Hadron Collider theory, but that building definitely has something to do with something. In terms of which of us came the closest to finding out why these weird structures exist and how they keep forming, I reckon he got the closest. And then, last month, my mate and I went to check on him at his house. Apparently, he hadn't been responding to texts or calls, which was strange since he never just dropped off the grid like that. Even if he was going on holiday or something, he would let someone know. When we got to his front door, it was slightly ajar. We got worried at that point, so we pushed it open. Inside was a vast expanse of darkness. No walls, no ceiling, just a flat floor extending inwards until the light from the outdoors dissipated far into the distance. A couple days later, we went in with our equipment and ropes. The area was far wider than the house's floor plan. I think we ended up walking the length of a football field, if not more. I was in his house a couple months before this. Now he was gone, along with all his possessions, his ugly carpet, his old armchair, his goldfish, everything. Every trace of him, gone. We optimistically thought that he might have come home from work to find his home like that, and tried walking in. We thought that if we walked far enough, and called out his name loud enough, that he might find his way back. We didn't want to grapple with the possibility that the anomaly formed while he was still inside, and that he just blinked out of existence along with his possessions. The police taped up the doors and boarded the windows, and a week later his house was knocked down. The anomaly was gone. Believe me, we tried to get back through the threshold, but it was gone. We stopped trying to find out the cause of the strange places after that. We just dropped our theories and left it alone. We don't go near the power plant. We don't even talk about it. This is the first time I'm mentioning it. My friends moved on from urban exploration for a while. They stepped up on their families and stable jobs, and they wouldn't risk any of it to explore another strange house or abandoned warehouse. That lasted all of a month. We still go out to abandoned buildings and train tunnels, as if in defiance of our fears. Yes, we have fears. Fears that we will wake up one day in a black void that was once our home. But, for now, none of us are going to stop doing what we love. We just can't leave it alone. I actually tried to walk away from it all, but it's just too exhilarating. I get too much of a buzz from stepping past a threshold, that feeling of time standing still, sounds of the outside world being replaced with stone silence, like hands clasped over my ears. I live for that feeling, knowing that, to the rest of the world, for that brief moment, I simply don't exist. The third tenant was a pale guy, tattoos all over his arm, and a large piercing in his ear. He looked sick and walked slowly. He told me he wanted to live in that house to get over his past, and I didn't want to ask for details. What really caught him was the forest view from the porch. He signed the contract on the spot, and the very next day his moving truck was parked in the garage. 2 weeks later, I realized I'd left my folder with some documents in the house and called the guy. No answer. I decided to drive out there and found the place empty, which was strange. He'd brought a lot of stuff during the move. His car wasn't in the garage, but I rang the bell anyway. Nothing. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, convinced something was wrong. But there was nothing to see. The house was empty, no furniture, dusty, just like it had been when I first showed it to him. A few months earlier, while eating breakfast, I got a call from a property owner who said she'd found me on Instagram. She told me she needed an experienced, fast-moving realtor to handle rental contracts for her house. And I lied, said I was that guy, even though I'd only had my license for a little over a year. Her voice was old, raspy, almost broken, like someone with throat problems. She said she lived abroad and needed someone local. I wouldn't even have to look for tenants, she pitched. There was already a list of people interested, and they'd meet me at the house. I wasn't too excited. It didn't sound like much of an opportunity until she mentioned my commission. I nearly choked on the sandwich I was eating. I repeated the number back to her. Sure, she'd made a mistake, but she insisted it was right. That amount would be handed to me in cash once the tenant signed and moved in. The only condition, she said, was that if a contract was broken due to my negligence or choice, I'd have to pay 1 month's rent. On paper, it didn't sound bad. I accepted right away. The next day I went to see the property. It was huge, isolated, no close neighbors. Inside there were expensive wooden furniture pieces, sculptures, installations that must have cost a fortune. The porch opened up to a wide view of a forest. Big wooden chairs faced the woods, and the owner made a point of stressing that they could not be moved from their place. I imagined myself retired there, sipping coffee, bird-watching. Coincidentally, the first tenants were a retired couple escaping the chaos of the city. When they signed, I went home torn between excitement and anxiety. Would the owner really pay me that much? I was broke. But a few days later, a suitcase showed up at my doorstep with the full amount in cash. Stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. Weird. Yeah, but not weird enough to stop me from trading it in for a new car. About a month later, the owner called again. Said the couple didn't work out, and new tenants wanted to see the house that day. I didn't ask questions. Couldn't complain about another commission. This time it was two women, a couple. One was a writer who told me she'd chosen the place to work on her next novel. Signing was easy, and another suitcase of money arrived the same way. Life was good, but honestly, I barely had other clients. All my golden eggs were tied to this strange owner I barely knew. Her name and info looked fake. Still, with the new tenants in, I figured I wouldn't hear from her for a while. Wrong. Another month later, same story. The women had left. Another new tenant. I was happy but suspicious. Why did everyone leave that house so quickly? Curiosity got me, so I called one of the last tenants. The number didn't exist anymore. I tried the old couple too. Same thing. After the third tenant, I tried to forget it. Not my problem. Who cared if they stayed or left? My fat commission was all I needed. Then, like clockwork, a month later she called again. This time she sounded excited, said the new clients were special, and she'd pay me double. I thought about asking questions, but double was too good. That kind of money could help me put a down payment on an apartment. I drove to the house determined to sign as fast as possible. I got there early and snooped around. No sign of anyone ever living there. Not even a pin dropped during moving chaos. Nothing. When the bell rang, I opened the door to a young couple holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket. I showed them the house, my stomach churning at what I could be part of. And of course, they loved it. The dad talked about how his kid would grow up running in the fields, exploring the forest, the childhood he never had. They signed right away. My hands were shaking when I handed over the paper. The next day was supposed to be their move-in. I went home and couldn't sleep. Tossed and turned, thinking I might be helping some crime happen. Around 1 a.m., I gave up and drove back to the house. I needed to check everything with my own eyes. I searched every corner. Bedrooms, closets, everything. Nothing. But I'd seen 3 moving trucks unload here. Not a single mark on the floor. Impossible. I stepped onto the porch, resigned that I'd never figure it out. Saturday on one of those big wooden chairs, thinking what I might have missed. That's when I saw it. Something shiny stuck in a crack in the chair. I pulled it out. It was a piercing, probably from the last tenant. On the needle was a small red stain. Blood. I reached into the crack again, feeling around, and touched something soft. I pulled it out. It was an ear. Darkened, rotten, with a torn hole where the piercing had been ripped out. I decided to push the chair to see what was underneath it, and with a lot of effort I managed to move it a foot to the side. On the wooden floor there was a symbol I couldn't recognize. Circles and shapes carved into the boards right under where the chair had been, like some sort of ritual. There were more traces of blood there. I froze, staring at it, heart pounding. What snapped me out of it was a laugh that came out of nowhere. A woman's laugh, echoing from the darkness of the forest. It started low and distant, but quickly grew louder, hysterical. Then more laughter followed, all of them female, all coming closer, aimed at me. It was like a whole crowd was hiding in those woods. The sound grew louder and louder, until my instincts took over. I bolted to my car, started it up, and sped down the road. The next day I called the couple and told them the deal was off. Made up some excuse. They weren't happy, but I didn't care. Soon after, the owner called me again. I didn't pick up and blocked her number. But the calls kept coming, from all sorts of different numbers. I answered one, and it was her voice, angry. "You broke our pact. The rent will be collected at the end of the month." She kept repeating it, and I hung up every time. I went to the police. They went to the property, found nothing, then came back pissed because I had wasted their time. There were no ears, no marks, no nothing. Today is the 23rd, and next week the month ends. I keep wondering if I did the right thing, if maybe I should have just carried on with that commission. Every day that passes, I feel the panic building. My phone is always turned off, and I've rented a room in a roadside hotel outside the state. But even here, every night, I dream of that laugh.